My husband didn't respond. Instead, he stood in our empty living room, empty because we had sold everything for this alleged fresh start. His silence spoke louder than words ever could. My name is Celine Harris, and up until this point, I believed I was getting ready for an exciting new chapter in Minneapolis as a financial analyst at Parker and Reed. I found their Ponzi scheme and brought them to justice. But when there was no job in London, my voice was barely a whisper as I stared at the email on my laptop screen, messages between Daniel and someone named Kate filling my vision with exposed months of calculated deception. Career over the past 10 years, but when Daniel came home 3 months ago with a ton of news about an amazing opportunity in London, I didn't think twice about supporting him. That's what partners do, right? They believe in each other. I sold our house, the first one I've ever owned, and donated furniture that I had carefully chosen piece by piece. I even sold my grandmother's antique mirror, which was all I had left of her, because Daniel insisted that we needed to travel light. Now that I understand why he had pushed me to liquidate everything, I asked, my voice steadier now as shock gave way to anger. How long have you been planning this with her for? So long? Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward his packed suitcase by the door. Celine, he began. How long have I pressed? 8 months. He finally admitted to Kate and me. It just happened, and then the plan just sort of evolved. Like, it was some natural progression to systematically destroy your wife's life. I felt sick thinking about how methodically they must have planned this, waiting until I had sold everything, converted all our assets to cash, and stripped away every safety net I had built. The money's already gone, isn't it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm a financial analyst. I should have seen the signs, but love makes you blind. And I had trusted him completely. She'll land on your feet, grabbing for his bag, and you do that every time. He was right about one thing as he approached the door, and this time would be no different. I opened my laptop and started typing, but I had no idea who he was dealing with. I had met Daniel 6 years prior at a financial technology conference in Minneapolis, and I remember being impressed by his drive and ambition. He was working for a smaller firm, but he had big dreams of becoming the best. What I didn't realize at the time was that his ambition would eventually consume everything, including our marriage. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore, like how when we first got married, I had just received a big promotion at Parker and Reed, and instead of celebrating my success, Daniel persuaded me to use my bonus to help him launch his own consulting business. He said that was my first mistake, but it was by no means my last, because for years I supported his endeavors both financially and emotionally. When his first business failed, I worked extra hours to keep us afloat, and when he wanted to try again, I took out a loan against my retirement account to fund it. Every time he vowed that things would be different, I believed him. Last year, Nat tried to warn me. Celine, she said during on one of our coffee dates. I asked, don't you find it odd that Daniel never wants you involved in his business decisions? You're literally a financial analyst, I said. Of course. He doesn't want to burden me. And he said, besides, he's my husband, so I trust him. The signs were all there. From the late-night phone calls he would make in the garage to the unexpected business trips, and he couldn't quite explain how. He began urging me to sell my assets months ago, claiming we needed to simplify our lives. I had almost $400,000 in equity from the sale of my house, plus an additional $200,000 from my retirement accounts and investments, all of which turned into cash, just like he suggested to make the move abroad. The irony doesn't escape me. I spend my days analyzing financial patterns for multi-million-dollar corporations, spotting inconsistencies and stopping fraud, but I couldn't or wouldn't see what was happening in my own home. However, as I sat there in our empty rental house, surrounded by nothing but packed boxes and crushed dreams, something inside of me hardened. I may have been blind before, but my eyes were wide open now, and what I was about to do would make Daniel wish he had never underestimated me. My hands trembled as I dug deeper into Daniel's email history, each message revealing another layer of their scheme. And Kate wasn't just Daniel's. While I was selling our house and dissolving my life in Minneapolis, they were setting up their new one in Austin. They had already purchased a house there with my money, of course, and the deed was in Kate's name, dated. The mistress was a former client who had helped him plan their escape for months, carefully manipulating me into liquidating all our assets when a wife suspects nothing. Daniel had written to her 6 weeks ago. She's too busy planning our imaginary life in London to notice anything else, almost making me feel bad for her. Even the casualness of that word made my stomach turn. Just 3 days ago, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel saying, "I'm not sorry. I've left signed divorce papers with my lawyer. It's better for both of us to make this quick and clean." Like ripping off a band-aid. But he'd taken everything, leaving me with nothing but packed boxes and an empty rental house I couldn't afford. I called Parker and Reed, my hands shaking, and Linda, my boss, answered on the second ring. "I need help," I said, my voice cracking. "And I can't come to London next month for the client meeting because there is no London." There was a lengthy pause before Linda said, "I need you to listen carefully. What Daniel and his accomplice have done isn't just morally." I felt the first tears fall down my cheeks, not from sadness but from relief at having at least one anchor in my life. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls with the police, bank, and lawyer, each time hammering home the seriousness of what Daniel had done, but it was a call from my bank that finally broke me. "Mrs. Harris," the fraud representative said gently, "I'm afraid the majority of the transfers were authorized by you. Since you willingly converted and moved the assets, there's very little we can do." The house was empty because I had purposefully stripped it down for our new beginning. As the afternoon light faded, I noticed that I hardly recognized myself in the window. However, as I looked at my reflection, something changed in my eyes. I was a financial analyst with expertise in tracking money trails, and I had contacts, skills, and knowledge that Daniel was unaware of. Daniel believed he had broken me, but he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I worked from my cousin Na's guest room for the next week, turning it into what appeared to be a detective's office, with printouts of bank statements, property records, and email trails on every night. "Don't you need to sleep?" she said, bringing me coffee one morning. "I can't keep going like this and can't sleep," I replied, looking through another bank statement. "But not while they're living it up in Austin with my money." I'd already traced the largest transfer, $380,000, which went through 3 different banks before landing in an account in Kate's name. That money had bought their house, which made my blood boil. They were probably decorating right now with expensive furniture while I slept on an air mattress. My lawyer, Sarah Mitchell, called with an update that made everything worse, and the police are treating it as a civil matter. Explained that since you approved the transfers and there is proof that you were aware of the accounts, I interrupted him for our alleged move to London. I understood Sarah's patience and that approving fraud will be challenging. "These cases frequently come down to that. And the paper trail shows your consent," she said. That evening, I made my first mistake and hung up feeling defeated. I called Daniel and said, "He won't get away with this." When he answered, he actually laughed and got away with what he signed. "Check the paperwork, Celine. You're the financial expert after all. And I'll fight this," I warned. "I'll take you to court," said. "I've lost everything." And I whispered, "Isn't she my home? My savings? My retirement? Everything I worked for is just gone." His voice was calm and confident, and he said, "Face it, Celine, it's over. Move on." After he hung up, I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do yet, and I broke down completely. All the stress, anger, and humiliation came pouring out. Nah, she found me sitting on the floor surrounded by papers, sobbing, and she said, "I've lost everything." Na took a seat next to me and picked up one of the bank statements. Though she was adamant that I still had my abilities and intelligence, she was correct about one thing: I still had my skills. As I dried my eyes, a thought began to develop. At Parker and Reed, I was still at the top of my game professionally despite Daniel's manipulation of me personally. I had access to sophisticated financial tracking tools that could follow money trails far more effectively than personal bank searches, so I called Linda the following morning and explained my plan. After I finished, there was a long pause, and she said, "Finally, done using company resources for personal matters is against policy." I replied quietly, but I also knew how many times my work had saved the company millions, and I've never asked for anything in return until now. After 2 weeks of vacation time, she said, "What you do with that time is your business, Celine. Just be careful. And don't do anything illegal. I hung up feeling energized for the first time in days. Daniel believed he had won and that he had broken me, but he was about to learn a hard lesson. Never underestimate a woman who knows how to follow the money using Parker and Reed's financial tracking software. It felt weird, but I forced myself to put my guilt aside because this was now about justice, not just money. The programs I used every day to identify patterns of corporate fraud began revealing something unexpected about Daniel and Kate's scheme. And when it got sloppy, I told Nina over breakfast. They believed they had covered their tracks. As I dug deeper, I found something that made my heart race. Daniel and Kate had been running a small-scale Ponzi scheme through his consulting business, defrauding at least 6 other people before targeting me. My hands shook as I read through the evidence, names, dates, and amounts. They had used their charm to persuade people to invest while showing them fake returns for a few months. However, they made rookie mistakes. What kind of mistakes? She asked, leaning forward. Kate had been moving money between accounts in an attempt to hide the trail, but she was using a pattern, transferring funds every 3 days, always in specific amounts. The software detected this right away. I wasn't their first victim. I was just their greatest score. Nevertheless, I called Sarah right away, and after I emphasized that we're not looking at a divorce dispute, we're looking at wire fraud and investment fraud. This is federal territory now, she said, changing everything. But I wasn't ready to go to the authorities yet. I needed more proof, and I had another card to play. First, I reached out to Marcus, an old college friend who now worked at the bank where Kate had opened her newest account, over coffee. I laid out what I'd found. "Oh, Jesus, Celine," he said, reviewing the documents. "This is serious stuff." "I understand," I said, "but that's why I need your assistance." What happened next was like watching dominoes fall. Marcus flagged Kate's account for suspicious activity. This triggered an automatic freeze right when they were closing on another investment property. The timing couldn't have been better. Within hours, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "What did you do?" Kate was displaying her first symptoms of terror, so I didn't reply. Instead, I sent all of my proof to the other victims I had identified, and one by one, they began to come forward with their own tales of betrayal. That evening, Linda called me to let me know that the FBI had gotten in touch with us about some strange transactions you pointed out in our system. I took a deep breath, explained everything, and said, "Oh, no need." She interrupted. "I've already told you that you had my authorization to use the software." That night, I sat in Na's guest room, staring at my laptop screen, when I realized that Daniel had made a crucial error. He had used the same password for everything since college, including his email. With a few keystrokes, I logged into his account and saw that he had used the same password for everything, including his email. I downloaded everything, and with my finger hovering over the forward button, I could send it all to Daniel's professional world collapsed within hours of sending those emails. His clients, colleagues, and business partners all received documented proof of his fraud scheme, and his phone must have been exploding with messages because he finally broke his silence. "You've ruined me," he texted. "Are you happy now?" I thought about how he'd laughed on the phone, so confident in his victory. The old Celine might have hesitated, but I wasn't the old Celine anymore. I clicked send. I was filled with icy determination as I gazed at his message. "Oh no, Daniel," I replied, "and just getting started." Agent Roberts said, "You know what you've uncovered here isn't just one isolated incident. This appears to be a sophisticated criminal enterprise." The FBI meeting the following morning was intense. I sat in a sterile conference room with 2 agents, methodically going over everything I'd uncovered. They seemed especially interested in the pattern of fraud against multiple victims. I gave them my final piece of evidence, a detailed spreadsheet that tracked every transaction, victim, and dollar. "Money always leaves tracks if you know where to look," I explained, adding that they thought they could hide their trail. Agent Robert then slid a document across the table. "We've been watching Miss Catherine Bennett Kate for the past year. She's been involved in similar schemes in 3 other states." My heart stopped. "She's a professional con artist, Mrs. Harris. And it seems your husband wasn't just her accomplice, he might have been her mark too." I felt the room spin a little as the agent struck me physically. Could Daniel have been deceived as well if Kate had manipulated him the way they had me? Before I could process this information, my phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. Kate. Kate is currently at the bank. Making a scene, I excused myself and called Marcus right away because she was threatening legal action. He explained that she would sue the bank for wrongful account freezing and that she had a lawyer with her. Don't release anything, I insisted. Now, to make things more tense, Marcus added that she was claiming that the money was a legitimate business investment and that she had documents with your signature on them. My blood ran cold, and I remembered signing a stack of papers Daniel had given me, allegedly for our move to London. I argued that might be true, but it complicates matters legally. I hurried back into the conference room where the FBI agents were. We were about to leave Kate's at Meridian Bank when I blurted out and started trying to access the accounts. They looked at each other, and Mrs. Harris, Agent Roberts, said, "We need you to understand something. If you've taken any actions that could be considered illegal, everything I did was legal." As they hurried out, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Had I gone too far? Had my desire for vengeance made me careless? I took up my phone and called Sarah, my lawyer. As it rang, I saw another text from Daniel. "You have no idea what you've started. Kate isn't who you think she is, and we're both in danger now for the first time since this started." I actually stumbled into the realization that I needed to talk to Daniel after a restless night of considering my options. If Kate was who the FBI claimed, I needed to understand the full extent of what we were dealing with. But I wasn't the same naive woman who had trusted him blindly, she warned. I arranged to meet Daniel at a coffee shop near Na's house, making sure it was public and well populated. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. His usual confident demeanor was gone. He looked haunted and nervous. "Kate's gone," he said, without preamble, sliding into the seat across from me. "Frozen, how does it feel, even if the house has been sold?" I asked icily to be the one left without anything, and his hands trembled as he set a USB drive on the table. I thought I could use it as insurance because I kept track of every transaction, conversation, and scheme she planned, but she's always been 10 steps ahead. I stared at the drive and then at my broken husband. In that moment, I took out my phone and called Agent Robert, watching Daniel's face go white. "And I have everything you need," I said into the phone, "and a witness waiting to testify." Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat as I hung up, knowing it was over. Kate may have gotten away with some cash, but she had lost her partner and her cover. Daniel, on the other hand, was going to learn that betrayal has consequences no matter what. The FBI used Daniel's testimony and the evidence I had gathered to track Kate down to Miami, where they arrested her while she was trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. With accounts spread across 5 states and victims dating back 6 years, Daniel received a lighter sentence of 5 years rather than 15. I attended their sentencing hearings, sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom, and watched them both being led away in handcuffs. I felt neither happiness nor sorrow, just a deep sense of closure. "And the money will be recovered and disbursed to the victims," Agent Robert later informed me. "It will take time, but you should receive the majority of your money back." However, I had already moved on from Parker, and Reed had elevated me to head of their new fraud detection unit because I had discovered Kate's scheme. I had purchased a modest home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was mine truly this time. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, I said, unpacking a box of books, "And you know what's funny? Daniel always said I was too trusting and naive, but it turns out I just trusted the wrong people." "Now?" Na asked, and I smiled. Later that evening, while standing in my new kitchen, I lifted a glass to my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and finally fully recovered. I had rebuilt my life from scratch, assisted other victims, and now I trust myself.